Fortunately, in Virginia, we don't have a big report to give you on our survey because it's been kind of quiet on the TCD front. But just to give you a little background information on TCD in Virginia, it started off in the Richmond area in central Virginia. This is the site where it was first found. Something was mentioned earlier today about outreach and the importance of outreach, and that played a critical role here because, and it's not that we were doing any outreach because this is prior to it ever being detected in Virginia. But Bartlett Tree Company was very well aware of thousand cankers disease, and they're the ones that first brought this to our attention. The gentleman that lived here in this house had problems with the walnut trees there, contacted Bartlett to come remove the trees, and then the Bartlett technician that arrived was suspicious and then started making some phone calls. Did not remove the trees at that time because he was suspicious of thousand cankers disease. So it turns out Norm Dart went out and confirmed it as thousand cankers disease. And there are a couple walnut trees there that had thousand cankers disease. And then out of sight of this picture and up on the side of the house is another tree that at that time looked very, very healthy. But it was infected with walnut twig beetle and thousand cankers disease as well. This map shows, well, going back before we knew thousand cankers disease was in Virginia, we started doing some surveys just to locate walnut in the state, and that's what the map down on the left shows you, is just different places where our inspectors would find walnut, make a note of the location so that they can come back and do a visual survey at some point later. Of course, then in the summer of 2011, we found thousand cankers disease at that site where I just showed you in central Virginia. And so then once we found it there in Chesterfield County, we began to do our initial delimiting survey. And the map there on the right just shows it's kind of hard to tell, but there are three localities there, Chesterfield, Richmond, and Henrico County, that were all part of that initial survey and ultimately the initial quarantine. This map right here is in Chesterfield County. The very center of the map is going to be the home that I showed you a couple slides ago, and that's where we first found thousand cankers disease. So our first goal was to do a delimiting survey. You know, when you first find it, you think that maybe you have ground zero. This was the initial infestation. So that's what we were doing. We delimited. We delimited by doing a windshield survey. Basically, we just took we drove up and down every street. Our inspectors drove every street within that 1 mile radius looking for symptomatic trees. And this is what we came up with. The green dots represent walnut. Those with circles represent positive thousand cankers disease. The blue dots, or the blue circles, represent those trees where they were suspicious, and basically our inspectors couldn't confirm. So then it was up to Norm to go out and make that diagnosis. And Norm, our inspector for this territory, those two especially became very, very efficient or proficient at doing the visual surveys. You know, they could drive up and down the street, and after a while they got pretty good at recognizing those trees that were actually positive for thousand cankers. So we did it. We're doing our delimiting. We're moving out, and we find it 4 miles out, almost by accident. Just driving around, found it at this farm 4 miles away from the initial site. So then we set up a grid system. These are 5 mile grids. And we basically, with the intent of driving every street, doing visual windshield surveys. Our inspectors paired up and just drove the streets. So you can see where we started to find them. And our goal here was to delimit, but then also it had a regulatory aspect as well, exactly which counties needed to be quarantined. We started finding it further and further out, and we realized at that point that we needed to kind of change strategies. So instead of delimiting from the center out, we just decided then to jump out and work our way back in. So we moved out about 15 miles, started surveying these 5 mile grids again so that we could find areas where we were free of thousand cankers disease. So in the end, this is what we found. All these localities, there are 2 cities and 5 counties, I believe, that were included in our initial quarantine, and all based on those visual surveys that we did in the summer of 2011. We finished up around Labor Day. It became very difficult at that point to really do a visual survey and find symptomatic trees because of the trees starting to turn at that time. Then we followed up that same fall with the pheromone traps, and this is the same area. This is going to be this area right here is that home where we found it initially, and then this is the city of Richmond. This area is going to be about 4 miles out where I showed you the slide earlier. So then you can see, it does look at that point like we have found what might be the center, but we're still finding them out fairly far. And all of these coincided with the visual, with our visual survey, just confirmed the visual survey. We placed them out further, and we did not find anything out any further than what we had quarantined. So that was our quarantine at the end of 2011. Then we continued surveying in 2012. We stopped our visual surveys at that point. We just relied on the pheromone traps. We placed there, you can see 48 traps in 2012. 2013, we basically did the same thing. In 2012, we had 4 new counties that were added because of positive finds. And this map shows it a little bit better. But we had, in 2012, we had a positive find right here. That positive find right there was very, very close to the border of, it was in one county and bordered 2 other counties, or was in close proximity to 2 other counties. So we actually found it in a second county, and then we quarantined the third county just due to the proximity of that find. Then up in the northern part of the state, up in Fairfax County, as you can see, there's an extensive survey done there in 2012. And that was because Fairfax County, which is basically the DC metro area, they have a very, very active urban forestry program. And they asked if they could get some traps and place traps to do the 1,000 Cankers survey there. So as you can see, that's where we did not place the traps. They placed those traps. And then you can see the positives there that are yellow right in this area. So that's in the summer of 2012 where we found it there. One of those is located right on the county line again, county line between Fairfax and Prince William. Once again, Norm went up, crossed over the line, started looking for walnut trees, and he was able to find geosmithia across the line in Fairfax County. So we added those 2 counties then. So you had this group of 3 counties here, 2 counties up here, which were all added to our quarantine in 2012. And then and then the other thing we did with our survey or our trap locations is we put a few inside the quarantine, but for the most part, we put our traps outside the quarantine, trying to see if 1,000 Cankers disease had spread to those adjacent counties. And they all turned up negative, with the exception of this one in 2012. And then in 2013, this right here is actually in Louisa County, this county right here. So in Louisa County, we found this past summer, we found one trap that had a couple of walnut twig beetles. We went out and tried to locate the fungus, could not find it. So basically, that's a trap with a walnut twig beetle find, or that's a site with a walnut twig beetle find only and no geosmithia. So that county has not been quarantined because we did not find the fungus there. So now this is just a quarantine map. Some reference back earlier. You've got the central part of the state that's quarantined, and up in the DC metro area that's also quarantined. For 2014, we planned another 50 traps this coming summer or next summer. But we're probably going to shift our focus a little bit. Instead of just trapping in the areas around what is currently quarantined, we'll still trap around there some, but we're going to take some of our traps and spread them out more throughout the state, try to focus on some high-risk areas, placing traps there to see if we can find it in other parts of the state.